Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lodge podcast. I'm your host, Scott Milley, and thank you for joining us for episode 11. Joining me today are my uniquely talented guests, Lee Vermeulen and Jesse McGibney.
Hello.
How are
Hi.
you both doing today?
Hey, pretty good.
Doing good.
So, both of my wonderful guests today are the co founders of Alientrap, the critically acclaimed indie studio based out of Toronto, Canada. Today, we're going to be talking about their award winning title, Wytchwood, keeping things fresh in game development, working in Ontario, and much, much more. So, without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So, let's get into it, guys. What was the catalyst? This is the first question that I've been asking everyone. We had a different question for season 1, and for season 2, this is something that I've gotten a lot of great feedback, but I kind of want to put a holiday spin on it. So, what served as the catalyst for getting you into the games industry? Like, what was was it a game experience? Was it like a brand or a studio that you really enjoyed? And then I'll bring the holiday into it right after. Lee, why don't we start with you?
Well, how it started was I had like a course in university where a game design course. I was doing games before that with our first game, Nexius, is a high school project, and that was kind of me modding Quake 1, and then eventually became a game, which happened to Nexius. But our first when I actually thought about entering the game industry as a serious project and not a free thing was after the game development course, and then I had to have a project. So I remembered Jesse, who I hadn't spoken to in like 4 years. We actually went to high school and elementary school.
Yeah,
So
we grew up on the same street.
Way
yeah,
back.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we did grow up in the same street. That's
We
true.
did.
But yeah, I remembered his art, and then I hadn't talked to him for like 4 years at that point. I think, right? I don't think we talked much in
Yeah,
until
we didn't talk that much in high school
yeah.
or college after that.
Yeah, but then I thought, well, I want to do this game. Like everyone else in the game course was having these large team of programmers. And I just wanted to make something on my own, but I wanted to find a great artist. So I contacted Jesse, and it was timed extremely well because you had your own, like you were doing a project too, right?
Yeah, so I was in art college at the same time in Ontario, and I was in fourth year as well. So we had our kind of fourth year big semester projects, and I was doing basically mock-up art for video games. So kind of like making fake video game uh, art that would have never come to fruition. And then yeah, Lee contacted me and he's like, "Hey, do you want to make an actual video game?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do."
Wow. There you go.
So yeah, we ended up doing that, making our first game Capsized as
A
our
school project.
respective school projects. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we
Working
had some
together ever
funding
since.
also from the we sold the rights to Nexius, or like the for that high school project I had, and that gave us some funding to finish Capsized, and yeah. And then I can't remember. I think that's 2009 when we started it. Then it was came out in 2011.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, because I graduated 2009.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you
it would
guys
have
you
been
guys have
that
been a
year.
staple in the Toronto industry for quite some time.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say. So we're gonna get into a couple of those titles. But one thing I did want to ask is with this time of year, right? Hopefully, I'm not sure about you guys, but hopefully people are able to see their families this year for the holidays. Obviously, depending on how things go here in Ontario. But what's your favorite? Do you have like a holiday gaming memory? Like for me, it's playing like Crimson Skies back in the day on the original Xbox with my cousins when they first got it. That's like the one that always comes to mind. But is there one that comes to mind for you? Do you enjoy playing like Mario Party when you get together with the family, or is there another favorite game you got for Christmas, something like that?
I mean, I have one that I think really did kind of kick me off into like game art, and that was um, for one year for Christmas I got the Warcraft battle chest. So it had like Warcraft 2 in the expansion and Warcraft 1 in it. And that was something I like specifically asked for and got, which usually didn't happen for big expensive video game stuff. But I had been playing the demo for that. I think I had on like a PC Gamer demo disc, and playing the heck out of the demo over and over. And my dad got vaguely interested, and he's like, "Oh, this is kind of cool looking." So he ended up getting me the full game. But of course, I loved Warcraft and all that. But specifically, it came with like paper manuals, like game manuals, and that had some of the concept art in it. And
Oh
I remember
wow.
being like 7 or 8, and like that kind of unlock something in my brain. Because before that I was drawing dinosaurs and fish and trucks and stuff like that. But then after that point, I was like, wait, you can like draw stuff for a video game. Like that's it kind of put one and two together. And then kind of from that point on, I was like, okay, I want to make games as
and look
an
where
artist.
you guys ended up.
Yeah.
Lee, what about you? Anything for the holidays that comes to mind?
I can't think of anything as inspirational as what Jesse said, but I just like the only thing that came to mind was there was this one Christmas where I didn't have a PlayStation, so I went to my cousins and my uncles, and then they had a PlayStation with Grand Theft Auto 3. So I just avoided my entire family for like a week and played Grand Theft Auto 3. And I remember like I'd wake up and I was on it, and if anyone tried to like make me go for supper, I would yell at them and try to keep playing Grand Theft Auto 3. And so, yeah, that's not at all related to actually, it's a terrible Christmas memory because it's like I'm avoiding family. But anyway, yeah, that's the best I could come up with.
Oh, it's a good answer. It's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's that for me. Yeah, same kind of thing. We're talking about Crimson Skies. Like it's just me and the cousins in the basement. Just being like, yeah, we'll be out there in a minute. Like,
yeah, this is me being very young, playing a very violent video game and obsessively doing it. So, yeah,
nothing wrong with that. That's how a lot of us got into the industry.
Yeah.
So one of the things I do want to ask both of you is, again, you were just talking about starting this in kind of 2009. How long have you guys worked together, and what is it that keeps the two of you continuing to collaborate 13 years later? Because of course, like you had just discussed about meeting in school and going through things like that, but 13 years at the same studio, going through all these completely different types of projects that we'll get into in just a moment. But I think that speaks to being able to keep friendship and business separate and things like that. And I think that there's a lot of problems with that for certain studios, right? They come right out of university and they're best friends. Let's make a game. But a lot of people don't think about making a business, right? They think they want to make a title, but it kind of morphs itself into making a studio supporting other people. So is there any pieces of advice or anything that you guys have experienced yourselves that you would love to share with our audience?
what's that saying? A business based on French. Oh wait, I gotta do this again. A friendship based on business is stronger than a business based on friendship. That's the saying. Which means that like don't start a business based on friendship. We have a friendship based on business, in that like 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 how well things are working and everything like that. So that's one thing I would get across, is that I wouldn't start companies with people just because you like them, sort of personally. It was definitely like when I contacted Jesse, it's because I'd been following his art. Like we grew up and we were friends as kids, but then also I had been following his art for a while, and he always had like one thing. So I did work with some artists before Jesse, and also since then. And one thing that I noticed early on was Jesse just had a great idea of like how things fit in a game. Like he would do the sort of individual parts of it, and I couldn't imagine where it was going in my head. And then all of a sudden it would all come together, and I'm like, oh my god, it's amazing. Like so I just it's sort of that was just immediately apparent when we started working on Capsized, just like understanding how to actually um how it can all fit together. And I remember Apotheon specifically, I was like, what is this? For the longest time you were doing stuff, you were making these like I didn't understand it until you added the post-processing and a bunch of other things, and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, I think a big part of why we work pretty well together is we have pretty separate skill sets, and then a little bit of overlap in the middle, which is nice. So we're not constantly stepping on each other's toes when it comes to, I think you should program this thing, or I think you should do the art this way, or we'll give each other suggestions, but we're I think there's a lot of trust there with letting the other person solve things in their own wheelhouse. And then the areas we do come together are the design discussions or things like that have a little more overlap, where we can actually have like kind of the same amount of input on it.
I think that speaks to a lack of egos on the team.
Yeah, it definitely is like, whatever works best for the project. And then, you need to be able to defend your idea, I think, is a like best ideas win sort of thing. Like if you think your design is the best, then you have to defend it, or you just let it go, because that's how it is. I think the only time that we've really had disagreements over like direction or anything was like there's a sort of overlap when it comes to the gameplay, where we get into like the details of, and then because I remember like Cryptarch, we would argue about whether the grenade should be timed or not, where you like just we get
Yeah,
really
little
into the
tiny
details,
things.
Yeah,
tiny
100%.
things, and then those were like days long arguments. So like that's
And
the
then
only
yeah, we
time.
made both. We made it.
Yeah. I don't remember how we ever resolved those. I think it was kind of like, well, I have to implement it, so I'm like, oh, fine, I will do it, and I'll show you that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'm like, okay, fine, it was a good idea, or
Yeah, you
like,
make a good
That's
point.
usually how things work
Yeah.
out. Is like because I've done that a bunch of times too, where it's like I have something in my head that I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is gonna work this way, and you're like, that's probably not a great idea, and then I'll hack together a solution for it, and then in the process of doing that, being like, this is actually not a great idea. And then, like you said, there's kind of a lack of ego of you have to be able to drop things that don't work, and there's the saying of "kill your darlings."
Yeah.
Yeah. For one of the current games we're working on, we just did a big shift from 2D to more 3D elements, and that was like a big kicking and screaming event because I really like doing 2D stuff, but being able to kind of learn and embrace a bit more of the positives that 3D elements can bring.
that was a really funny experience because early on in the project, I was trying to make things more 3D, and then so we had a lot of discussions back and forth, and I was like, okay, we need to add more 3D elements, move the process for more 3D, and then Jesse was really opposed to that. And then we got further and further, and then he slowly added more 3D elements. And he's like, and then at that point, I was like, but I made all these 2D systems. I want to keep 2D. And then so we like completely reversed stances in the next argument. But it all got resolved. We have a good the project's in good place now.
Oh yeah, we're going to be talking about that one in just a moment. One of the things I do want to talk about is obviously we need to talk about Alientrap as a studio, right? So like at least from what I've been able to see, you've worked on at least 8 different titles. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is that a lot of indie studios you'll see will have a genre. They may try a couple different genres or a couple different types, find one that works for them, and either make a direct sequel or at least stay in that same vein. Alientrap doesn't seem to do that, right? Like right now we're talking about Cryptarch and then Gunhead coming out soon, right? Like that being your first direct sequel, I believe. So that's something I did want to bring up is like why is it so important to like Alientrap's identity that you kind of continually switched from Greek mythology to sci-fi to fantasy, as well as 2D roguelikes, and to all the other genres that you guys have worked on? Is that something that like you think is like integral to Alientrap, or is it, hey, let's just make what we want to make?
I always tell people about that I don't think that's a good idea. Like I don't recommend it.
I don't know if it's a positive.
It doesn't make a lot of business sense, to be honest with you. Like it, when you have a success, you as a business, you got to keep, you add more sequels, you keep the same audience, that sort of thing. But we always didn't do that. I think just because of our own personal, we wanted to do something else. Like after we finished, it's been every time after we finished a project, we've been wanting to do something completely different. And so that's why it was never like it was honestly never really a sound business decision in some ways. It was just kind of like, I am sick of working on this. I want to work on this.
The shorter answer is that these things take so long to make. So after working on the same thing for 4 or 5 years, you're like, I don't want to.
Just so burnt out on that. It's like, let's do something different. Let's make 3D rather than 2D or roguelike action, all that kind of stuff. It's just like
it does definitely mean we have to kind of like reinvent everything at the start of each project, which again, makes it take longer, and the cycle starts all over again.
Especially for you, like as an art director, like I can imagine if you're working on sci-fi stuff for 4 years, the last thing you want to do is work on slightly different sci-fi stuff for the next 4 years.
Yeah,
so being able to see you guys kind of jump all over the place has been interesting.
Or like we become very aware of all the issues and problems with our own pipeline and development, where it's like, oh, I wish I could do things this way because I've been making things with this tool set for so long. But yeah, like Lee said, it definitely has some downsides.
Yeah, I think like the worst example of that is Wytchwood and Gunhead, where like you can't have 2 more opposing games of what they are. Like I don't even think I've met anyone who would really enjoy both of those.
I guess that's true, right? You don't really have the audiences even crossing over to a certain extent.
Not on that one. Like we have other projects that I think Wytchwood players would be really into. So, but not Gunhead. So like we're not going to use the same. That's why we don't have a single company Discord and stuff like that, because I just don't think there's like between Modbox, Gunhead and Wytchwood, what overlap? What's the Venn diagram that like where someone's in between all those? And I just don't. Besides myself, it just doesn't exist. So yeah.
So there seems to be almost, at least from the outside looking in, kind of two different identities for Alientrap before Apotheon and after Apotheon, right? There just seem to be such great like critical acclaim when it comes to that. That's the game I actually want to start with. So obviously, being able to do something in ancient Greek mythology is hot right now, but being able to do something like that, you know, a few years ago, that must have been something really exciting for you, Jesse. And when it comes to that art, it's just something so distinct. You can actually see it on the background of Lee's camera right now.
Right, yeah.
But I wanted to just kind of ask you just off the bat of like, where was the inspiration for that vibe? Was it something that you had kind of slowly worked on in the background while you guys were working on, you know, Capsize and Autocraft and other things, or was this something that you had, you know, brought up and worked with the team and said, you know what, this is the next thing that we need to do? Just how did that process go?
I think that the kind of art direction for Apotheon sort of came as we were concepting out what the game was going to be. I think we started off, you know, we just come off of Capsized and we're like, all right, let's do another side scroller action game, but this time, you know, maybe a little more open world with you know, walk around in cities and you know, talk to people and fight people and stuff like that. And I think we're kicking around some ideas of you know, it started off as like a more sci-fi, like a cyberpunk or a,
well, it was still like Greek. It was Greek gods still. So it was like the idea was like Zeus with a laser pistol.
Yeah, I was trying to spruce up the sci-fi by being like, well, what if it's like, you know,
which is still a great idea.
It is. I 100%
you know,
agree.
like a sci-fi Greek mythology is like should still do that.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of concept art I have kicking around somewhere that is like, you know, guys in togas with laser spears and stuff like that. And then I think as we were kind of experimenting with some of the art, you know, setting up some of the character puppets and stuff like that, and looking at references, and I was like, why don't I just do the pottery thing? Like it's such like an obvious side scroller style. Like everything is already flat and two-dimensional and you know, it's lots of like repeating patterns, and that was a huge part of it. Was so coming off again from completely doing a 180 from the previous game, Capsize was very painterly. All the levels were, you know, there was like jungle trees and bushes and little sponges and stuff everywhere, but it was very tedious to make the levels for that. So I wanted something that I could kind of tile out levels nice and quickly with like repeating patterns and things like that. And that worked great with Greek pottery because it's
an elegant solution.
Little filigrees and bricks and doodads and stuff like that. So that fit in really well. And then the hardest part was just kind of figuring out how to extrapolate the reference material into, you know, like a playable world, because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't really exist in 3D pottery. Like they don't really do that much environment stuff. Like there might be like a wall or like a tree, but they never really show like a building or a city or how they would handle some things. And then being able to handle a little bit of depth, like, you know, trees in the background behind the player, or you know, how to use color to make things a little more readable, because it's really just black and red. So, you know, we threw in a couple more greens and blues and
those are the like unique, like underappreciated challenges that most people don't see.
They're very tiny, but
but you notice if they're wrong,
yes,
right? That's the thing, is
totally.
like if you don't notice, then that's a good thing, right? That it's just kind of in the background, like you guys have done your job. But like when those things stick out, like those are the things that people immediately attack, right?
Yeah.
Well, the greatest thing of Apotheon was that it was just the art style worked so perfectly production wise, like you mentioned. Like we could actually do it. I think at the end of development, it was still Jesse as the only artist on the team. We had another person. So like that.
Yeah, we were still mostly
a large game.
Person team.
Yeah. We had someone else helping with level design, but it was still like, so, you know, making a 10-hour experience. And like if we had the idea for Cuphead at that time, you can't make Cuphead, you know, you need a team of 10. But Apotheon, we were still able to do it entirely ourselves. So yeah.
Wow. It's rare that they work in tandem. when you're talking about like production and art, like it does seem like you do have to create a lot of unique assets and things like that for a lot of games. But
Yeah.
this one you were able to kind of like tile out. And Lee, I'm sure that really helped you too when it comes to like the actual game design of things too, right? That you were able to kind of build things out a little bit easier.
Well, we're both designers, so it's definitely like I'm not the main. Right, I don't even think for the early titles like Capsize and Apotheon, we definitely I don't think we either use the title designers. I guess we kind of like
just
so
programming,
Yeah,
art,
there's
and
only two
then
of us.
design
yeah
was where everything crossed over.
yeah. So like anything narrative based or like world based, that would be more Jesse, and then maybe I'd be a lot of the sort of gameplay details, but not really like the overall like
Yeah,
the
you're more
metagame of it.
handling like the larger systems that are
Yeah.
running, how the AI works
Yeah,
and
things like
things
that.
like
But
that.
it's design is kind of all over. We definitely we think about production a lot. I think that's like just when it comes to art style or it comes to the design, like how are we actually going to get this thing done? Uh, so yeah,
So
I
you
think
want to find those shortcuts that save you production time, but also look good and ideally look unique because of the way that you're doing them, like with the Greek art style.
I think it's like that actually goes back to like our previous conversation where we're talking about how is Alientrap been doing this for 13 years and continues to improve and continues to just do better and better things. Is that production mindset is actually a lot more rare than you would expect when it comes to indie studios starting off, right? Making a game, then you start to realize all the production demands, and then when you try to bring on freelancers, you try to bring on independent artists, being able to explain that to them and be able to get them in those pipelines. Like you guys seem to just kind of have that mindset going into every project that you can slot in people. Oh, we need a freelance artist for this, or oh, we need someone for this, that it kind of fits into your pipeline rather than, oh, hey, I have all this stuff on my plate. Can you come and do some of this?
I think a lot of it also comes
Please.
again because we're such a small team. Our fingers are in all of it from the start to the finish. So if we don't set it up good at the start, it's our problem at the end as
That's a
well.
good point.
Um, yeah, so it very much behooves us to figure that stuff out.
And one title I did want to talk about for Alientrap is Modbox. Just completely separate from anything you guys have done before. Where where did this come from? Like I don't even know the first question I want to ask. This just seems just so out of left field. The fact that it was on Magic Leap, right? It's just like obviously speaks to just the difference of the other type of titles that you've worked on. So where is this a labor of love, or where did this come from as an idea for the studio?
Back in 2015, I got the HTC Vive from Valve because I really I wanted to try VR stuff, and then I started. We had a previous title, Autocraft, so I started making that in VR, and then it became Modbox slowly. But really, what happened with Modbox is that I loved. I realized that as a programmer, you slowly get into tool development. I don't know why that happens, but like you start out, and you're just trying to get like a game done, and then you start like making tools to make the game, and then you dive further and further into tools, and then soon I was making my own programming language for Modbox. That just slowly happened. So Modbox definitely came of just trying to make a thing about game development, like trying to make a like how can I change game development to be like different to just like sort of like take that like sandbox and keep going further into it, custom language, new way of doing game networking, and just sort of a tech. Like I went very far down the tech rabbit hole of Modbox of solving issues. So yeah, that's how it kind of came about, just out of force, I guess.
And just
Yeah,
pure like passion and obsession with
yeah,
that, right? Because like that those tools, and at least from my side, again, not being a developer, is those tools don't seem very necessarily relevant for like the other type of games that you guys are making, right? Like, do you feel like you learned a lot during the production of Modbox that you were kind of able to implement into future titles?
yeah. Actually, like so, uh, before in the past with our other games, my objective was always just to finish them as quick as possible, and then the code base and technology about was always a mess. And then we'd really have to throw out so many things each game. So with Modbox, I was trying to do more of a lot, like it was actually about the technology rather than anything else. So from that, we're all like the current projects we're working on are all using sort of things that were learned from Modbox. So like how to structure everything. So it all really tied together in that way. But I just treat game development differently now than I used to with the Capsize and Apotheon, where I'm just trying to like get things done, don't care about things. So I'm trying to have things be more of a structure that we're building on that we can reuse. So
And you can bring to the next game, like all the lessons that you've learned, whether it's
Yeah.
a different genre or different type. You can still take a lot of those lessons, and you don't feel like you're completely starting from scratch every time because you are using a lot of the same technology, like you said.
Yeah, same ideas.
Jesse, was Modbox something that you really enjoyed working on? Was it something that
So
obviously was a labor of love with Lee? But I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I have almost no connection with Modbox.
Oh wow.
So yeah,
we were doing multiple projects at that time.
Yeah,
Or
so the
we
team
kinda
kind of
still are.
split into two separate teams. So we had Modbox and we had Wytchwood going at the same time.
Got it. Which is just like so heavy on the art, which is actually the next thing we're going to get into is talking about Wytchwood, because that's every review I've ever read, anyone I've ever talked to about the game. I first started playing the game. That's the first thing that sticks out to you, right? Is it's such a unique art style, which is near impossible, I would say, now in the industry. Like, there are obviously some ones that we really love, but it's one that you can see and point to and say, I know exactly what this is. So one of the things I do want to talk about with Wytchwood is obviously multiple Canadian Game Awards, which is obviously like something that I was very proud of, and I love to see that. And the critical acclaim for it, and you see like all of the raving reviews on Steam. Other than the success in the other genres that you guys had worked on with like roguelikes, what was it that you decided made you decide that you needed to do Wytchwood? Which, for those who don't know, what do you think is the best way to describe that? Obviously, like a crafting adventure game.
We've our elevator pitch was a crafting adventure game where you play as the witch in the woods. So you're making potions and spells and kind of solving different fairy tale type quests.
So did that go to the same as kind of the other games you were talking about before, where it was we kind of came up with the design and then started moving forward when it came to art, or was this how did this labor come as well? Like, I'm just very curious when it comes to a lot of these games, just kind of where did they come from? Because a lot of times you hear of studios that'll have like a passion project for somebody, that they'll draw some art or they'll do some design and then they'll eventually get to that title. Or was this something that you guys kind of conceptualized and came up with and said, you know what, we want to make a crafting adventure game, and then you kind of made it work?
So so a lot of it has to do with my partner Ariane, who's the other artist on the team, and so she had some roles in. She joined us for Cryptark, I think, helping out with a lot of the weird like normal map lighting stuff. So she was kind of doing art and animation, and then we hired her on more full time for Wytchwood, as both an artist and a writer and a designer. So kind of the conception of Wytchwood was a lot of it was her idea, as again, because we wanted to do something different. So we're like, what if we didn't do like a run and gun action shooter, and did something a little more laid back, a little more chill, a little more crafting and collecting and narrative focused. And I really like those kinds of games as well. So we kind of set about trying to design a more. Originally, it was going to be more systemic, so it was going to be more kind of like a Don't Starve type crafting game where you're picking up objects and crafting them, and it's a little more emergent. And the art style kind of came just from looking at like fairy tale source materials. So we were looking at a lot of Disney movies, a lot of like the early like Snow White and things like that have like gorgeous hand painted backgrounds and like gouache with really nice looking trees and things like that. And then just children's books and like old like medieval woodcut illustrations, and just trying to pull out what we could from there. And it was also our first isometric game as well. So the other ones we've done have been side scrollers. So trying to figure out how to make that work in a kind of a top down aspect while still keeping the 2D stuff that we liked doing, because neither of us are we're not particularly 3D minded. So keeping things 2D but still playing in a 3D space was a big part of trying to figure stuff out. But yeah, it really kind of came from that one. Came from the very start of like, okay, we're gonna make like a crafting game where you're a witch. And then the aesthetic really kind of just popped out of that, of like, all right, it's going to be like a fun fairy tale, kind of like pop-up book aesthetic almost.
Like working on games during the pandemic was obviously incredibly difficult, but I feel like doing some of the art for Wytchwood must have been almost like therapeutic for you and your partner.
Oh, sure. And
right, I mean, like instead of having this dark dystopian game that you just happened to be working on when all this started,
yeah,
you kind of had something that was a little more lighthearted and a little more like full of whimsy and wonder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we all work from home anyway, so I feel like our working habits really didn't change at all when the lockdown happened.
I guess that's true.
It really was not a huge shift.
Lee, what about you? So I know you were working on 2 projects, kind of side to side. But like when you were done with Modbox, or when you like your team was done with Modbox and you jumped over with Wytchwood, what was something that really struck you when you started working on that title? Was it something that you really enjoyed doing? Unique challenges that you remember, and that you learned going into your next titles?
I mean, one thing I got across from Wytchwood was really that like how nice the fan base was. So like the player base. So when you make an action game, like a very like shooter heavy action game, you get a fan base is kind of like usually a lot of, I don't know, you get a part of 13-year-old boy fan base, which isn't
Yeah.
really the best sometimes.
Yeah.
Sort of the emails you get from them and everything. But with Wytchwood, the emails we got, like bug reports where something went horribly wrong, they were so nicely emailed and just so pleasant to get. So that's one thing I realized about Wytchwood is that you make a pleasant game, you get very pleasant, friendly people that are into it. Technology wise, we yeah, I don't really know. I mean, um, with Wytchwood, Gunhead, and Modbox all going at once, I realized that it's very hard to keep 3 code bases in my head at once. It was very much
That's
like,
fair.
yeah, it's very much like that movie, The Butterfly Effect, where Ashton Kutcher keeps getting universes in his head until his like head explodes. That's what it felt like. 3 different code bases that you're working on. So, yeah, I realized that multiple projects, like there's a lot of advantages to having multiple projects as a company. It's nice to be able to switch between things. Like Gunhead was always when it first started was always kind of the back burner project. When we had extra like time, we would go back to Gunhead. Um, but then it has its challenges where like 3 things are coming together at once, and they're all like, the ideal is to have one project in pre-production, one that's really going, and one you're just releasing. I think
Yeah,
that's the ideal.
exactly.
But what happened to us is we'd like, okay, all 3 of these things need to come out right now, and we're we need to finish all 3 of these things as soon as possible, and that's not the ideal situation. So yeah, I still think we're going to continue to do multiple projects. It's just like I think it'd be a little bit smarter about it going forward in terms of um, we wouldn't be doing multiple 5-year projects. I don't think it'd be
It's
like,
just
oh
yeah, like right
yeah,
side by side, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, there'd be like the big one, the small experiment one, that sort of thing, and maybe like something like Modbox is good because it was so different than
yeah,
everything else. But when you're releasing Wytchwood, it is like just releasing it is such a huge production. You just need to get like the marketing lined up and the trailers. It's very different than sort of this strange experimental VR title sort of thing, um, than a standard uh, giant game release. So I think we just need to we're going to continue to do multiple projects, but we'll just be smarter about it.
I guess that's another benefit of like what we were discussing before with Alientrap just being kind of all over the map when it comes to your style, is that you do get that relief. If you do have 2 or 3 titles going on at the same time, you're not moving to another title that's something that's very similar, something that's in the same vein. At least you get to kind of move your brain. But of course, you go to 3 different ones, I feel like it would be a little bit overwhelming. But at least gives you that like respite that you could go from something like Modbox to a wonderful fairy tale land like Wytchwood.
Yeah, and then if you just want to shoot things, Gunhead. So
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is actually the last game I want to get into, was obviously Gunhead being the sequel to Cryptarch, right? So that was something that you guys loved, and like same thing, critical acclaim, which is just so fun to be able to see that and just constantly see these 9 out of 10s on Steam, and all these great reviews for a lot of these titles. So what was it about Cryptarch that made you guys decide, you know what, we need to do a sequel? Because if you, like you're saying, Gunhead kind of went alongside everything else, so it feels like you made that decision pretty early on after Cryptarch's release. So I'm just curious of kind of how that went.
well, it's funny because I think it happened like while before Cryptarch was finished. We started, but actually, it's funny also because Cryptarch is not our most successful game. Like, it's probably less successful than Wytchwood and Apotheon, but it's for some reason the one we're making a sequel to. Like, that doesn't make any
Yeah.
business sense. So that's not how you run a company. You don't take your least successful property and then make a sequel to it.
Still
Uh,
critically acclaimed though.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like,
no, and it's actually like it's still. I think Cryptarch is probably my favorite of our games. Really, when I look back, like it's the one I go back to the most, and like it's the best. It's my favorite action experience, I'd say. So but how it started was that we were finishing Cryptarch, and then 3D artists on the Modbox team had time, And so he had the idea like, well, I kind of want to. Actually, I think he just shared his own experimental. Like he just took one of the Cryptark art and made a model of it, a 3D model. I think it was like the Cryptark main guy. And then
Yeah,
we were like, well, that
the
looks
suit,
awesome.
the mech suit for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like, well, that looks awesome. You should keep doing that. And then he sort of started making more of this concept, like taking Cryptark and putting it in 3D. And then we had another project. So then we suddenly had another game that we were doing.
Yeah, it was one of these weird things where it's like, oh, this game it translates entirely into 3D. You really don't have to like come up with any new game systems or anything at all.
Must have been a good feeling.
Yeah, it was most satisfying. Like when it was starting, it was the most satisfying development. It's been like the longest now, but like when it was starting, it was incredibly sad because I always also wanted to make an FPS game again. My first game was that Nexius and FPS.
Which was in the Quake engine, right?
Yeah. So this is Unity, but I wanted to. So I had a lot of FPS things I wanted to try out, and so combining that with Cryptark, and it was just so satisfying production-wise. It was like we did pre-production beforehand, in that like in what Cryptark was, because we just took all these ideas of Cryptark and put them to 3D, and it was such a great chance to do a sequel because it was like so different. It's not like, oh, we have the same game and some new weapons or something. It was completely different, but it used all the same things that we learned and everything. So it was really great production for a while. And then basically what happened with Gunhead is that once we got further with Gunhead and Wytchwood, we were at the point where they were both in the same production state, and we needed to finish Wytchwood. So that's why Gunhead got pretty delayed to that due to that. But yeah,
was exciting to be able to go back to Cryptark from a narrative perspective. There's something good being able to go into Gunhead because, like, again, being a direct sequel, there obviously must be a lot of like tie-ins. So I'm just curious of like from a narrative perspective, was it something that you enjoyed going back, and was it something obviously not knowing that you were going to be doing a sequel right after? Were there any unique challenges or any fun things that you kind of got to take that you're like, oh, I didn't know we were going to be able to do this. I'm really excited to be able to kind of continue this part of the story or continue that part of the story.
So yeah, it's like, I mean, so the narrative of Gunhead is something that still has to be kind of fleshed out some more. We have a lot of systems, but how they kind of connect and relate to the previous game.
Yeah, the final script is still coming together.
Yeah,
I would say.
But I mean, also like the narrative for Cryptark is it's pretty thin as well. It was more about just kind of setting up the atmosphere and the characters and things like that, and then having enough kind of interesting dialogue to string together the different roguelites and stuff like that. So like there had kind of been narrative roguelikes before that, but nothing super, there wasn't like Hades or anything like that.
As I was right about to say, and I was like, one was a pre-Hades world and one is a post-Hades world.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a kind of a different mindset going into things. Of, well, there's the holy grail.
Playing Hades and being like, oh, you can put this much story in a roguelike. So I'm not super sacred about the lore and narrative of Cryptark. In the end of the day, it's supposed, it's a bunch of space pirates blowing up skeleton cyborg ships,
which I feel is honestly a big relief for a lot of people. Like, obviously we all love our narrative in certain games, and like that's one of the things that draws me to like some of my favorite games of all time. But then being able to go into games like that where it's like you don't need to, sometimes the lore could feel like a game almost like kind of bogs it down in a bit. We're like, okay, I need to read this, I need to read this part of the menu, or I need to make sure I talk to every single person when I go back or something like that. This one you can kind of just go in and shoot stuff and just enjoy yourself. So that must be really nice for you guys.
Kind of the more and more projects I do, the more, or I don't know, the less beholden I am to a lot of the kind of nitty gritty things. Like for Wytchwood, it was very satisfying to just kind of let go and have fun with the like dumb fairy tale aspects of things, and being like, none of these make sense because they're like fairy tales. Like, things just kind of happen in them and they're fun and goofy and weird, and that's more the point of it.
Feels like freeing in a way.
Yeah, rather than trying to and meticulously world build.
You need to read this 400-page document before you can fully appreciate the world. Like I'm getting back to like The Witcher 3, obviously with the next gen update, and it's like gone through all the books, go through all the games. I'm like, this is like such a gigantic task to be able to enjoy this game.
Like, what is this political system that I have to understand?
Exactly. So being able to go into something without that kind of baggage and be able to just kind of go in and enjoy it, and there's nothing too far beneath the surface.
And
It's kind of relaxing in a way,
I feel
especially
like
you're
I think
talking about Wytchwood.
Apotheon was a little bit like that because obviously we were drawing on pre-existing Greek mythology, and we actually brought in a mythology
Scholar.
scholar, yeah,
That's
who
amazing.
who helped out a lot with getting things right. And Greek mythology is also because they're basically also fairy tales, so they're completely contradictory and they change themselves all the time.
Just dark.
Yeah, yeah. Who begat who? But yeah, that was it was a lot to consider, a lot of threads to kind of keep tangled or untangled when you're writing this narrative, even if it's only just for you and the one other person that spent way too much time reading Greek mythology. But yeah, definitely having a little looser story is something I'm all for in a lot of games.
So with all of this, all these titles that we've gone through, obviously with Gunhead being the next thing that, of course, you're working on, is there anything else that you, just as a studio, pie in the sky, a type of game or like a type of genre like that you would love to do next? Like whether like don't think budget limitations or a small team, but like what is something that you would kind of point to and be like, you know what, at the end of the day, this is the title I've always wanted to make, or this is the genre I've always wanted to be able to dip our toes into.
We had a holiday get together last night. We actually brought up that
Yeah.
same topic. It's strange. It was only like 8 hours ago or whatever because we were up late.
Yeah, I think it was literally that same question.
Yeah, it was the exact same worded question. Strangely, right now we Gunhead is going to be the next release, but we are still we're still a multi-project team. But I think we're going to be a little bit smarter than before and not announce things too early. We did that.
Fair.
We did that with Wytchwood. We announced Gunhead too early too, but we for both Wytchwood and Gunhead, what you saw in that first trailer was everything we had, and then not only everything we had, but everything that not even most of that worked. So it's just
piecing it together to make it
yeah.
work in the trailer.
And then I don't know why we did that. It's really satisfying to get things out. So I think we were just, and I used to just wanted things to be public, whatever I was working on. We were never really oh, we got to keep it secret. So a big reveal. We just wanted to get things out there. But now I don't think that's a good idea. I think that we can be a little bit smarter about that. So I think with the exception of Gunhead, I don't think we're going to be announcing anything till after release, but we're kind of still working on other projects. So I'm kind of just saying that because so I don't want to say that our dream project.
Oh, no, of course.
Yeah. So we have sort of dream projects that we hopefully still doing as side things, but unlimited budget thing. We were just talking about this last night. So I still want to do a GTA. I still been
bring it all the way back to the opening question.
Yeah, my dream game I keep bringing up with Jesse, and we had a discussion about this last night. I don't want to give too many details because then
oh no, please, yeah.
But really, I really want to dive into a procedural generation in a Grand Theft Auto type setting, just like a city with a lot of interacting systems. So I think there's a lot of I don't know how far down I would get the procedural generation. I did some experiments with Modbox with AI and AI dialogue, AI generated.
I saw
stuff.
your talk at VRTO.
Yeah, and then so I want to make a game. I don't know. I'm struggling to. I'm still figuring out if that works well with the game, but I think that could work well with the sort of procedurally generated city. And then if you just sort of embrace AI right now, when you talk to them like that, those chatbots, they can say anything. So if you try to make a detective game, for example, with them, an AI might confidently give you a wrong clue. When you're asking the questions about it, and then that really screws up a lot of things. But I think there's a potential to make games with that in mind, sort of the right procedurally generated sandbox, and you have to just accept that it doesn't have this sort of you can't force it to have certain mechanics because it would just anyway. That's the sort of dream game that I hope we dive into at some point.
So this might not be the podcast for it because I'm not an expert in this at all. But you do see a lot of those conversations talking about procedural generation and AI, and will that make things easier for game devs? Do you think that there'll be something? This is a question to both of you. Do you think there'd be something lost in that? I personally do. But again, coming from the two of you, have been in game development for over 10 years, of having that human touch to things, because there's a lot of mimicry, right? There's a lot of imitation that you can do with AI, but just having the nuances and just that. Do you think we're close to that, where it'd be almost indistinguishable from a human writer? And do you think that is kind of where the industry is going, and you think it's a good thing?
I mean, the whole discussion on AI is a whole
That's what I mean. I'm like, this is not the podcast for that. It's just I know the
Yeah.
interest that you guys have in it. So I was just curious to hear from the experts.
You know, especially right now, kind of you know, lines are being drawn and things like that. I don't know. I've got a couple different directions on it. You know, there's obviously the whole ethical part of it right now that's one aspect, and then there's almost like a humanist existential part of it on the other side of it, like as an artist, and you know, there's a certain point where like a tool switches over into automation, and then you know, you start losing the creator's like imprint on something. And I think that's usually the finding where that line is like so much of like digital art even currently is like trying to simulate and get back to like old, like how do I mimic like a pen brush stroke or a paintbrush or stuff like that. So I don't know, it's tricky, but yeah, but from a production side of things, like I also get the idea of like, you know, finishing a project and being able to have efficient production goes a long way. But yeah, it's just a matter of figuring out where that distinction between tool and automation is, I think.
Lee, what about you?
Yeah, I think that I'm excited about AI art and the possibilities there, but in the sense that I think it'll allow for people to like someone to like with a creative vision to make a very large production. I think it'll allow for like I'm not really a fan right now of a lot of the current ways that where someone just puts in a prompt and like I made this and it's just like a collection of other people's things that are like put together. But I think there's a way to do it. I think there's a way to do it that's sort of as a tool that will allow people to like, you know, maybe in 20 years we'll see what the equivalent is of a Marvel movie made by a teenager, or like that is the extreme example, but that idea that like it'll allow people to get their creative vision across with a smaller with just because of the better tools.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that'll happen because I've based on what I've seen, I like it looks like it's going down a path that it'll allow you to have more authorship. So like I don't think the tools are there right now. Right now, it is very much that like it's not. I don't think it's very well suited for game art yet, in that you just like give a prompt and it's just a random thing. But there's potential of you direct it in a certain way, or you give it reference, you give it shape, and you give it the vision, and then it helps with the sort of and then it knows the sort of patterns of what's like I like to that vision, and it helps you along that path. So I'm excited for it in that way, but it's going to be weird.
Tread lightly.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of arguments about it and weirdness, and I'm very conflicted about it too. There was a Twitter thread recently where someone made an entire children's book with AI art, and then it was just like it was, and then the end of it, my take is like I don't know, you know, like I really don't have it. Like I kind of I can see both ideas of that, and like both have, you know, I'm very conflicted. Is what I would say.
That's a good answer. Yeah, I had no interest in getting into that conversation. It's just having the two of you in here and AI coming up. And I was like, I gotta ask. I gotta know. Cool. So one of the things that I always got to ask everyone on the podcast, especially we have, you know, some amazing professionals that come through here, like the two of you, is we do have a lot of people that are either looking to break into the industry or are in other facets of the industry and maybe looking to get more into art, or maybe getting more into programming and design and everything that you guys are working on. So I would love to be able to hear just like two quick pieces of advice that you would give to those people. I know you've been asked questions like this before. I'm just curious if there's like your two go-to, and if like you're looking to break into the industry or you're looking to make that shift, what are like the two quick hits that you two usually throw out there?
I would say that being a generalist is a very helpful skill. You know, I feel like a lot of people I've talked to, and even myself when I was a kid, I was like, I'm gonna be a concept artist, I'm gonna be a character artist, I'm gonna be, you know, this one specific specialty. And especially for indie games, like everybody wears so many hats, and so being able to do a lot of things is very, very helpful, even if they're just like cursory understanding. Like, you know, I understand so little about like just Unity in general, or a lot of the coding tools or anything like that. But like just being able to look at them and be involved in the conversation when it comes to design or implementation or the production pipeline. Just having a little bit of understanding is so helpful. So yeah, that's the one thing I would push is just educate yourself on a lot of different little things, like especially with YouTube tutorials. Like learn a little bit of 3D, learn a little bit of audio design, learn a little bit of level design, XYZ. Like it's all useful.
I've heard a lot of that from like all the producers and like production specialists that we've talked to. Has been exactly that, where it benefits them so much to have a little bit of experience in everything that they're managing, essentially, right? So if you're talking to someone who's dealing with audio, exactly, you may not be the expert in it, but you at least understand it. There's nothing worse than having, a manager go in and say, "Hey, why isn't this done?" and they have no idea of the challenges or how the pipeline works. So even to have that generalist understanding, I've heard that a lot from producers. Lee, what about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think just for my own sort of how I learn and how I do things is
That's what we're here for.
I try to make everything like a project. If I'm trying to sort of get into sort of 3D development, trying to get something into VR, I would just do it, and then rather than sort of reading a book of how to do it, and then being like, oh, I've now studied it all, I can now start. You can just start, and then just be horrible at it, and then that was the only way that I've ever learned to do anything, was just through projects. I feel like. So my advice for me to get into game development is kind of just dive in and then see where that takes you. Yeah.
Do either of you have any experience in AAA, or has it always been just indie from the start, and this is just the way you like to do business?
No.
Started out of school, so
yeah.
I worked making Facebook games for like, I don't know, a year and a half, I think, as an artist. But that was obviously not AAA. But that's the only other kind of game studio experience that I have.
Yeah, I would love to see how like Valve works, especially with their weird organizational structure. I have something weird going on with my lights where it just randomly flickers. I would love to understand that. But so far, we've just completely been doing whatever works. So like we've never adopted Scrum or any of those other weird software development models, which I think are all kind of terrible. Yeah, but I would love to. It would be good to know what not to do, I guess.
Yeah, like I know a couple. I've had a couple of friends that worked at larger studios, but that's mostly hearing, horror stories that come with all of that as well.
It is a great way to break into the industry, like you were saying, Jesse, with being a generalist, getting a job at an indie studio, learning what you want to learn, and taking everything in, and then maybe if you wanted to do something else or you wanted to go into AAA, you would go in with some experience. I think a lot of people want to start off by saying, "Hey, I want to work at Bethesda," or "Hey, I want to work at Ubisoft." And it's like, unless you're, I find it harder for something like that.
Yeah, maybe I don't know because I mean I can't speak too much of how the actual structures there work, but a lot of them are very specialist. They'll have departments for specific things. A lot of them you will get hired to do a very specific thing. It's like, okay, you're making crates. You're the crate guy. You do nothing else. You don't implement them in game. You don't have to texture them. You're just making crates. And if they need someone else, they'll hire someone else for another specialty. So I actually don't know how far generalist stuff until you start getting higher and higher up, like you said, to the production level jobs where they're kind of talking to a lot of different disciplines.
For developers that join us, it's very self-directed. Like it's kind of like there's always usually the thing on Slack is someone just like, hey, I tried this. And it's not like we had a meeting about that. It's like we it just kind of happened, and everyone is very self-directed, which works for us. But I don't know if that model scales, or if I don't know if that would work for everyone. And you have to find the right sort of developers that can thrive with that. So yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that's really great advice. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate that. So the last thing I always want to get into, especially this being an Ontario-based podcast, is working in Ontario. So for those who don't know, the Lodge is part of Interactive Ontario. And we were lucky enough to be able to host our first IO Connect just a couple of weeks ago. We threw a big event at El Macombo, had a wonderful panel, including CJ Project Red, Supergiant Games, the day before they announced Hades 2. So I had to message Darren after and be like, "Hey, man,
Yeah, you
kept that under your hat the
know?
whole time.
They could have announced it there. That would have
I
been
know, right?
good.
That
Yeah.
would have been so much better." But yes, and obviously with keywords and Ubisoft as well on that panel. But it reminded me of why I love working here in Ontario. So that was the first big major industry event that I was able to be a part of during my time at IO. And I got to see so many faces. Like Leo, I was able to talk to you for a bit. So many people that I haven't really had a chance to talk to because I started working at IO during the pandemic. So both of you have worked in Ontario and Toronto for quite some time. What is your favorite part about being able to work in the video game industry in Ontario as well as Canada at large? Is it something that you still enjoy to this day, or is there a dream of, hey, I want to move to Seattle, or I want to move to Santa Monica, and go to a bigger hub when it comes to that top tier development?
Well, we started in Saskatoon. Like that's well, when we Jesse was in Toronto when we started the company, and then I was in Saskatoon. Yeah, but Jesse's from Saskatoon. So the company like was incorporated in Saskatchewan originally, and then we moved in 2013. I want to say 2014.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, but we specifically chose Toronto because of the game development scene. I remember like I think at that time, Lovers in Dangerous Space Time, which is coming out. It's still I still have all these Lovers in Dangerous Space Time posters. It's still my favorite game, I think. Uh, and then at the same time, Guacamelee was coming out, and it just seemed like and
Shout out to
everything
Drinkbox.
that yeah,
Yeah.
Drinkbox, and that's the Guacamelee poster over there actually. And then at the same time, Cappy was doing Super Time Force, so it just seemed like a great it seemed like the game development hub at the time. And then so we specifically came for that reason. And we were embraced warmly by the game development community in Toronto. And yeah, so I'm really also looking forward to events coming back. But
Yeah,
so yeah.
Yeah, they're just starting to get off the ground now. So it was nice to see people again after 3 years of not seeing other game developers. Yeah, I would say that's my favorite part of Ontario development as well. Because even outside of Toronto, like I know Ottawa has a really big indie community as well. They run.
We're getting there. I'm based out of Ottawa.
Okay.
So we're getting there. Like that's the thing. Like so many people when they think of Ontario, they always think Toronto, and like there's a reason for that. There are just so many studios and there's so much talent there. But when you look at like the rest of Ontario, there's some amazing stuff coming out of Niagara, the bigger GTA.
We work with some of the guys out of Niagara as well.
Exactly, like London. Like there's a lot of like other hubs in Ontario as well, and I think a lot of those are becoming more and more prevalent. I think Toronto will continue to be kind of the core for in-person events, if for nothing else because less people have to travel, like for those type of things. Obviously that's what hybrid I think is always going to be something important, especially now. A lot of the people outside of the GTA were kind of able to attend more events because everything went online or everything went hybrid. So I think that's something that we're gonna, especially IO is going to try to keep going because we want as many people to be able to be there as possible. But yeah, is there anything before we head out here that was left unsaid? Anything you want to reiterate or anything that you want to let our audience know about Alientrap and everything you guys do? You can't say nothing.
We are looking for developers right now. So we're looking to hire people because we have a few projects. But yeah, the next release that we'll see, I think the only next thing that we're like going to be announcing is the release date for Gunhead. I think that'll be the next announcement before we announce anything else that we're doing. But we still have a bunch of projects that we're working on. So we're looking for developers to help for that. So if people want to join Alientrap, they should apply. Because we're looking for Unity developers, but who knows? We could be looking for writers soon, that sort of thing.
Where could they go to apply?
On our website, we have a form to fill out.
Perfect. We'll drop that in the description.
Sure.
Jesse, is there anything from you before we head on out of here?
No, not particularly. Like I'm just happy to keep making games. Looking at the date and be like, yeah, we've been doing this for like over a decade, which seems kind of nuts. And we've never really ascribed to crunch culture or any of that kind of stuff. So it's just I'm really happy to just keep making games. It's great.
You didn't say your dream game. Now that I remember,
I didn't say my dream game.
Yeah,
that's true. I have like a little notebook full of like dumb game ideas that I feel like most of my dream game would be taking some obvious idea and then flipping it around and seeing if it still works. Most of my dream ideas wouldn't translate into full games, but they would be fun for me.
It's a very game dev answer,
Right.
rather than just like, hey, I want to make the next Hades, or hey, I want to make the next Witcher. And it's like, I
Yeah.
want to make something that no one else has ever made before, or ever even thought of.
Yeah. What if this, but with a twist?
Right. All right. Well, thank you both for taking the time, especially so close to the holidays. I really appreciate both of you taking the time to come and talk to us today and to share your experience with myself and our wonderful audience. Again, a big thank you to Natalie for being on the 1s and 2s in the booth, making sure all this works properly. And again, obviously, thank you to Ontario Creates for your continued support of everything that we do here at the Lodge. So we're going to be doing a live stream later on this week. Check out our socials for more details on all of that. And we really hope that all of you have a magical, safe, and truly relaxing holiday season. We will be back with the next episode of the Lodge podcast in 2023. Lee, Jesse, thank you again. And until we all see you next year, take care.